Welcome back to the channel, where we dive into the darkest corners of history and uncover the secrets time tried to hide. Today we're unraveling one of the oldest and most haunting mysteries of all. What really happened to the two child princes who vanished inside the Tower of London? The last time anyone saw them alive, they were playing with bows and arrows in a quiet garden inside the tower. Two young boys, just 12 and 9, laughing as their arrows hit the targets. But only weeks later, they vanished without a trace. And their disappearance became one of the darkest puzzles in English history. Now here's the part that will send shivers down your spine. We already know who wanted them gone. We know who had the means. We know who gained everything from their deaths. Even after 500 years of searching for the truth, we still can't say with certainty what truly happened in their final hours. But the pieces we do have tell a terrifying story. This isn't just another cold case buried in time. This is the story of how two innocent boys became the biggest threat in England just because of their bloodline. It's about how their uncle may have decided to remove them permanently, and how powerful people around him had every reason and the chance to help make it happen. Even today, the mystery keeps evolving. A recent find in 2024, a single piece of jewelry, has reignited the investigation. I've spent hours digging through old records, comparing modern forensics, and sorting through every major theory. And what I've uncovered may change how you see this case forever. Because even though no one agrees on who gave the fatal command, there is one disturbing detail everyone believes. These boys knew they were going to die. Just imagine it. July 1483. Inside the Tower of London, 12-year-old Edward kneels quietly by his bed. His doctor, a man named Dr. Argentine, later revealed that Edward asked for confession every single day, as if he truly believed death was closing in on him. Stop and think about that. A child only 12 living in a royal suite supposed to be safe. Yet he was preparing his soul like someone counting their final hours. His little brother Richard, the Duke of York, had only recently arrived at the tower. Their mother Elizabeth Woodville had fought hard to keep Richard with her, hiding in Westminster Abbey. But on June 16th, under huge pressure, and with promises that he'd be safe, she finally let him go. A historian wrote bitterly that the young boy left her side never to return. You might be wondering, wasn't the Tower of London also a palace? Yes, it had been a royal residence for generations. Future kings would often stay there before their coronations, and Edward V was supposed to be crowned on June 22nd. Everything was already being prepared. The date was set. The celebration was near, but that coronation never happened. Because while the boys were still playing in the garden, their uncle was changing everything. Richard, the Duke of Gloucester, was moving quickly and decisively. On June 13th, during a meeting at the Tower, he suddenly accused Lord Hastings of betrayal. In less than an hour, Hastings was executed outside. There wasn't even time to build a proper scaffold. They used a log. Then, just 3 days later, Richard's men made a shocking announcement. They declared that King Edward IV's marriage was illegal. They claimed he had promised to marry another woman before Elizabeth Woodville. So his children, Edward and Richard, were now labeled as illegitimate. Convenient, isn't it? With one legal statement, Richard erased his nephew's claim to the throne. And on June 26th, Parliament officially offered Richard the crown. He accepted it, putting on a show of hesitation that many historians now find suspicious. By July 6th, he was no longer Duke Richard. He was King Richard III. And the two young boys locked in the tower. They were no longer future rulers. They were obstacles in his way. This is where the true horror begins, because from here on, the records fall silent. After Richard's coronation, sightings of the two princes became fewer and fewer. The Great Chronicle of London gave us the final confirmed moment. They were seen again playing and shooting arrows in the garden of the tower. But then nothing. An Italian diplomat named Dominic Mancini later reported something chilling. The boys were moved into the deeper, more secure rooms of the tower. Mancini was writing for the French court that same year, and what he described will stay with you. He said the boys were seen less and less behind windows and bars, until one day they were simply gone. Just imagine that scene. Two young children staring out from behind iron bars, realizing that each new sunrise could be their last. By the fall of 1483, whispers were already spreading. People feared the boys had been quietly killed. But that leaves us with two haunting questions. Who would murder two innocent children? And maybe, more importantly, who could... Let's start with the most obvious suspect. The one man who stood to gain everything, King Richard III. Richard had full control of the Tower of London. He had already declared the boys illegitimate. He had claimed the throne that once belonged to his older nephew. And as long as the boys remained alive, they were a threat. Even if the law called them bastards, the public might not care. People could still support them. Loyal followers of the old king might rally behind them. And if they did, Richard's entire reign could collapse. In the cold, ruthless logic of royal politics, the death of those boys was a solution. And the signs pointing to Richard are hard to ignore. He never brought the boys out to end the rumors. He never claimed someone else had taken them. When rebellions broke out in their name, he stayed silent. He could have stopped it all by proving they were alive. He didn't. Foreign observers didn't hold back either. In January 1484, the French chancellor made a bold public claim. He said Edward IV's children had been murdered without consequence, and that their killer now wore the crown. This wasn't a rumor. It was an official international accusation. But that's not even the most shocking part. Let me tell you about a confession, one that could change everything. In 1502, under the reign of Henry VII, a man named Sir James Tyrrell was arrested. He was brought to the Tower for questioning the very place where the princes had once disappeared. While being interrogated, Tyrrell allegedly admitted to a terrible crime. He confessed to murdering the boys on Richard III's direct orders. According to this account, Tyrrell didn't act alone. He recruited two men, Miles Forrest and John Dyan. The method was horrifyingly simple. They waited until the boys were asleep, then smothered them with pillows. Once the princes were dead, the killers buried them beneath a staircase. They covered the bodies with heavy stones. Now, some historians are skeptical of this story, and there's a good reason. We don't have the original written confession, just secondhand reports from years later. But here's the part no one has explained away. In 2024, researchers discovered something remarkable. A will from 1516 mentioned a gold chain once worn by Edward V. So where was this priceless royal artifact? It was in the hands of Sir James Tyrrell's own family. A woman named Lady Margaret Capel Tyrrell's sister-in-law left the chain to her son, stating it had belonged to the young king. How did the family of the alleged killer end up with the prince's jewelry? One disturbing theory suggests it was a trophy, proof that the mission had been completed. But Richard III isn't the only suspect in this grim mystery. In fact, some believe we've been blaming the wrong king all along. Enter Henry Tudor, who became Henry VIII after defeating Richard at Bosworth Field in 1485. His claim to the throne, almost laughably weak. Henry was a distant Lancastrian with barely a drop of royal blood. To strengthen his grip on power, he married Elizabeth of York, the prince's older sister. But here's the twist. If either of the princes had still been alive, they would have had a far stronger claim than Henry ever could. Now imagine this. What if Richard didn't kill the boys? What if he simply kept them hidden alive but tucked away? And when Henry took control of the tower, he found them and saw them as a direct threat. So he did what he was already known to do. He quietly had them eliminated. It may sound far-fetched until you look at Henry's track record. In 1499, he executed Edward, Earl of Warwick, another possible heir from the Yorkist line. Henry wasn't squeamish about removing rivals. He was ruthless about keeping his throne. And then there's the strange case of Elizabeth Woodville, the boy's mother. In 1487, just 2 years into Henry's reign, she lost all her land and was sent to live in a convent. Why would Henry treat his own mother-in-law like this? One theory, she had learned the truth that Henry, not Richard, had killed her sons. But here's the problem with blaming Henry's seventh. No one at the time accused him. Even Richard's fiercest supporters never pointed fingers in his direction. If there had been any suspicion, Richard's loyalists would have shouted it from the rooftops, but they didn't. Not a word. Which brings us to a third suspect, someone whose betrayal would have cut far deeper. Henry Stafford, Duke of Buckingham. At first, he was Richard's most trusted ally. He helped Richard seize power and supported his claim. But just months after Richard took the crown, Buckingham turned on him. In October 1483, he launched a rebellion. It failed. He was executed on November 2nd. Now consider the timeline. The princes vanished sometime between July and October. Buckingham's rebellion October. Could the two events be connected? Here's why Buckingham makes an interesting suspect. He had royal blood tracing lineage from Edward III on both sides. With the princes declared illegitimate, he was suddenly close to the crown. He also had opportunity. That summer, while Richard toured the country, Buckingham remained in London holding power and access. And then there's this chilling clue. A Portuguese chronicle written just years later claims that by Buckingham's orders, the princes were starved to death. Not smothered, starved. A slow, cruel death, told by a foreign source with no obvious reason to lie. And there's more. In 1980, researchers found a document in the College of Arms. It stated that the princes were killed by the vice of the Duke of Buckingham, by his advice, counsel, and design. Did he act alone? Could he have carried out such a horrific act without Richard's knowledge? That seems doubtful. But the mystery doesn't end here, because just when you think the case is closed, a new twist appears. So stay with me. What you're about to hear might change everything you thought you knew. At the time, people could only guess the gender of the skeletons. There was no DNA testing, no way to confirm if the remains even belonged to children from the 1400s, let alone if they were the lost princes Edward V and Richard, Duke of York. Today it seems like the answer should be simple. We have advanced technology. We could examine the bones, run DNA comparisons with known descendants from the York family, and finally know the truth. But here's the frustrating reality. The authorities won't let it happen. The Church of England, along with the royal family, has blocked every effort to re-examine the remains. They say it's out of respect for the dead that opening royal tombs for testing would be unethical and disrespectful. And so, we're left in a painful limbo. The answers might be lying right there inside Westminster Abbey, but modern science isn't allowed to reach them. Those bones could solve the centuries-old mystery, or they might reveal that the story we thought we knew was wrong all along. Now imagine what those final days must have been like. Late in the summer of 1483, the two boys were no longer allowed outside. No more archery in the garden. No more laughter under the sun. Just silence behind locked doors as the tower became more prison than palace. Edward, the older brother, was only 12. Old enough to understand what was happening. Old enough to feel fear. He began speaking often with Dr. Argentine, a royal physician. His words felt like those of someone preparing to die. Picture him trying to stay strong for his little brother, telling him everything would be okay, even when he wasn't sure himself. They would have noticed things changing: fewer servants, no more visits, no word from their mother, no invitations to court, no messages from their sisters, no appearance from their uncle, the king. And then one night, we don't know which someone came for them. Was it Tyrell and his men? Was it sent by Buckingham or someone else entirely? We may never know who entered their chamber that night, but the result was the same. 2 boys born to rule, silenced for the simple crime of being in the way. Or were they? Because here's what truly haunts this case. Not one piece of hard evidence confirms the murders. There's no official record, no confirmed witness, no signed order, no identified bodies. Every confession was secondhand, and every theory has its cracks. What we do have is silence. The boys vanished, and in that silence, people have filled the gaps with 500 years of rumors, stories, and legends. One of the strongest stories came not from history, but from a play. Shakespeare's Richard III gave us the image of the wicked, deformed uncle killing his sweet nephews in the dead of night. That version stuck in the public's imagination. But Shakespeare was writing under the rule of the Tudors, a family that had every reason to turn Richard into a villain. Even Thomas More, whose writings provide some of the earliest details, was a child when the events happened, and wrote much later under the rule of Henry VIII. Can we trust those accounts? Can we rely on the versions passed down by people with so much to gain? Still new clues keep coming, like the golden chain of Edward V, somehow ending up with the family of the man accused of killing him. Or documents that hint the boys may have survived, challenging everything we thought we knew. Every new clue reminds us this case is far from solved. It may be 500 years old, but it still feels alive. This story tears away the fantasy of medieval royalty. It shows us the truth hiding behind the crown. These weren't fairy tale princes in a shining castle. They were real children full of fear, caught in a deadly struggle for power they never chose. The Tower of London still stands today. It's no longer a prison, but a popular tourist spot. Each day, thousands walk through its stone gates. Many stop at the Bloody Tower, the place where legend says the boys were last seen. The spot where they may have played is marked. The staircase where bones were once found is listed in guidebooks. But the tower keeps its secrets close. Somewhere behind those cold walls, 2 boys vanished. Maybe they were smothered in their sleep. Maybe they were left to waste away in silence. Maybe they escaped and vanished into history. We simply don't know. The tower saw what happened, but stone doesn't speak. The story of the princes in the tower reminds us history isn't clean. Mysteries don't always have answers, and some wounds never close. Power has a price, and children have always paid for the ambitions of kings. Even royal blood can't protect you when the throne is up for grabs. Still, people continue to search. Historians dig through dusty archives. Scientists develop new tools to test old evidence. Maybe one day someone will find a letter, or finally test the bones in Westminster Abbey. Maybe the truth is hiding in a forgotten library in some quiet corner of Europe. Until then, we're left with a puzzle. 2 boys who vanished, a list of suspects with blood on their hands, a crime scene that now sells postcards, and questions echoing across centuries. Who killed the princes in the tower? How did they die? Where are their remains? Or did they survive slipping away to live new lives in secret? The fact we're still asking these questions tells us something powerful. Some stories never fade. Some mysteries live on, not because we can solve them, but because they force us to face hard truths about power, about greed, and about what people will do to wear a crown. As I finish this journey, I keep thinking of Dominic Mancini's words, of two boys seen less and less until they were seen no more. They didn't just vanish from a tower. They vanished from the pages of history, and we've been trying to bring them back ever since. Maybe their true legacy isn't in how they died, but in how they haunt us. A reminder that even royal children can disappear, and that some truths are buried too deep to find. So now I ask you, after hearing all the evidence, the theories and the clues, what do you think happened to them? Who do you believe was responsible? Or do you think against all odds they lived out their lives far from England under new names, leaving their past behind? Tell me your theory in the comments. Let's keep the conversation going. And if you found this mystery as fascinating as I did, check out this next video where I uncover another royal crime that changed history forever. Until then, remember, the past doesn't always stay buried. Sometimes it's waiting right in front of us to be uncovered.